My name's Michael Birch Pierce. My pronouns are they, them.
How and why did you first get involved in art?
My mom was a studio art major at William and Mary um, back in the 70s. And so, like, I grew up in a home that was very much an artistic home, even though she wasn't a practicing artist. She was a preschool teacher and a mom. Um, but the art kind of came to be after, well, I had a career in fashion design, which is art, which is an art, but kind of after the career in fashion design, I kind of shifted to a career in fine art after going to grad school at Savannah College of Art and Design, um, and totally planning to be a designer still, and then somehow just fell into this world of fine art afterwards. And now that's my whole career. Now I don't make clothes anymore. It's really interesting.
How do you get your ideas for a lot of the work you do?
How do I get ideas? A lot of it, most of the work is inspired by investigations of identity, investigations of artifice, strength, vulnerability, intimacy, gender, lots of different things that kind of are tumbling around in my head. Everything's kind of connected to my own relationship, um, both with my body and with the people around me. Um, and then I get inspired by sparkly things. Then I also get inspired by just like, like Dolly Parton's costumes, and artwork of like Nick Cave and Liza Liu. Um, get inspired by like Las Vegas and toddlers and tiaras, drag queens. Like there's a lots of different areas that it comes from. Um, but these days, yeah, most of the ideas now are really kind of material explorations, and it's kind of like figuring out what new things I can do with new materials, um, like velvet and fur and leather um, and like fishing lures. A couple of years ago, I started making a bunch of stuff out of fishing lures. I don't know, it's just like messing around with stuff and kind of seeing what sort of new structures and
How would you describe like your process for some of your embroidery pieces that you've been doing recently?
times like the process itself. Of developing the work needs to just come from curiosity, needs to just come from exploration. A lot of times it's like it's working in like tiny little like 3-inch hoops to kind of work through ideas as like little sketches that then I can address later on in much larger forms. Um, but I don't know, it's like it's a mix of processes, really. Um, there is a certain meditative process to the hand embroidery. There's something that is, like really anxiety calming, something that's like really like mind clearing about just sitting and hand stitching one thing at a time, just over and over again for hours. And then there's also an immediacy and a power and an excitement to the machine work, and so they kind of work in tandem with each other, kind of pushing and pulling in this dichotomy of this immediate machine work that's quick, that's hard to control, and then kind of going in with the hand work to kind of balance that out. These crazy machines that I'm like trying
Yeah.
to force them to do what I want them to do, which isn't necessarily what they're made to do. Um, and so yeah, it's kind of working with that energy. And then there's other times where I just want to hand stitch, and it's just like let me just chill out. Let me just stitch. Let me just clear my mind completely,
Yeah.
which is a much different energy than the other stuff. And so a lot of it's like finding the balance between the two.
I guess why did you choose to continue to work with like the beading and the textiles in the fine arts, like after your fashion career?
Directly informed by and influenced by the fashion career, I think. Um, Towards the end of the fashion career, I was really focused on surface design, and so I was designing beading and embroidery at Diane von Furstenberg in New York. Um, I was, like that just like was way more exciting than designing clothes, was designing what the surface was going to be, right? Um, and so a lot of the impetus to move to the fine artwork was just um, being able to use the same vernacular, being able to use the same language and materials and sort of identity of fashion to connect this all to this glamorous couture sort of world of materiality. So like
Yeah.
it's very much using those surfaces in the same way that I would create an artifice in fashion, where I would create a garment that would help somebody express their identity, would help them realize the version of themselves that they want to present, which is very much what my work is about. I just started using that same language in fine artwork and stuff that didn't go on the body, but because it was so connected to fashion and using the same techniques, um, you get the connection to the body even without it necessarily having to be on the body. Not necessarily different. And it's also very much not the same, but it's kind of everything kind of flowed from one into the other as I transitioned, and I still very much retain a lot of that world in what I'm doing.
What's your biggest challenge in creating your work? Um,
Getting people to buy it.
yeah.
Getting people to give me money so I can pay my mortgage and my
Yeah.
bills. Um, the challenge, like making the work isn't hard.
Yeah.
Making the work just flows out of me. Like that's what I'm programmed to do, really. Um, the biggest challenge is finding the right space for the work, finding the right voice for it, finding the way um, to do all of the behind the scenes paperwork and administrative things, and it's like the nitty gritty boring stuff
Yeah.
to get it advertised and get it sold and get it made.
How would you say your work has changed over time?
I mean, it's definitely changed from the reliance on the garment, right? It's no longer so intimately connected to needing to be seen on a human figure. Um, but over the years, like I think like immediately after I was making garments, I switched to making things that were completely non-subjective, very abstract works that was more about creating sort of surfaces. And it was sort of this like abstract idea of portraiture and this abstract idea of what are these sort of uh, versions of ourselves that we create, and what are these versions of our own stories that we tell people with the way that we dress ourselves, right? um it was really abstract, and so eventually I found a way to merge, because at the same time I was doing this like embroidered portrait work which felt very separate from the more fine art sort of embellished work. And eventually there came this point where I found a way to like merge the figurative work with this abstract structural surface work. Um, and that's this world that I'm inhabiting right now, is kind of, you know, using these bodies and faces and kind of mixing them with the um, three-dimensional couture embroidery, and also very much owning a queerness to the work that I think I denied for a long time when I was younger, like 10 years ago, like when I was in grad school. I very much wanted to make work that was universal, that like, yes, I'm a queer person making art, but I didn't want to make queer artwork. And then, you know, I grew up and I realized uh, in order, like the reason why I made this art is because I'm queer. Like that's like very much integral to the story I'm trying to tell. And then the, you know, through the work I came out as non-binary. It was literally making this work that made me find out who I was as a person. And so a lot of that journey, a lot of like investigating my own relationship with my body has worked its way into the work so much more than it ever did before I came out, if that makes sense, or before I was on that journey.
Do you have like a favorite piece or just like a series that you've worked on?
Oh God. I mean, I feel like it's always whatever I'm working on right now. Although not always what I'm working on. Sometimes what I'm working on right now, it's like I hate it because I'm like right into it, in the middle of it. The work I'm doing now, there's something really exciting about, and it's the work I've been doing for the last 2 years. On it, let's, in all honesty, where I'm kind of like I've been painting bodies with this sewing machine right here. Boop, boop, right there. I'm sitting at the sewing machine to talk to you. I don't know. So I'm painting with the sewing machine in a way that it kind of zigzags back and forth, and I'm able to sort of like build these figures with it. I feel like I've got it. Yeah. I don't know. Here's one. So it's like I can like really, I don't know, like create something more in depth, more personal with this machine, and then go back and really meditate on everything, because the figure happens so quickly. So sometimes it's nice to go back and sort of like spend more time getting to know them, putting all the rhinestones and stuff on it.
You've always like worked with all these rhinestones and beads. How do you like choose which ones you want to use in a piece?
Intuitive about it. I just get this vibe of like which pieces belong together, which pieces speak to each other. I have an insane collection of rhinestones and sequins and beads, like thousands and like tens of thousands of beads and rhinestones all stacked up in the storage under my desk over here. And then more and more boxes everywhere else in the studio. It's obscene. But I organize them not necessarily by like type of bead. I organize them all by color. And so like I'll show you one. And these are my sort of emerald green beads. And so each one of these little like separate little compartments. I've got like big old sequins. I've got chunky rhinestones. I've got tiny little beads. I've got sequins. They're all in here. And so this is just like one shade of green, and I have like 4 or 5 different things of these full of greens. I use them. I use them like paint palettes. I use them as if I'm like pulling out the green paint and the blue paint and mixing them together. A lot of the decisions I need to limit myself. I think that there's a part of me that's really really eager to just go in and paint with all of the colors and do the whole rainbow. And then I usually get ahead of myself and I make huge mistakes when I do that. Um, so I find that limiting my color palette to just a color or two really helps me make smarter decisions. It removes a lot of variables from the equation to make things more refined and make things sort of stronger for me.
Yeah.
And that it needs to be it needs to be intricate, it needs to be intimate. I try to think of myself as like an ant walking through my embroidery, and the embroidery as like an architectural like maquette or something, that I'm trying to like build up these structures that somebody could walk around if they were really teeny. um, Try to make something impossible and dynamic and exciting with them. So it's not just like, well, this rhinestone looks good next to this one, but it's like this rhinestone will look cool if it's shoved up underneath of this one, and then we have a big old bead coming down at an angle this direction, and then like an array of tiny sequins, like sort of exploding out from inside of there. And so it's sort of like thinking with a different energy, and a different sort of thinking as if it's a much bigger scale than I'm really working with.
Yeah.
So that's like structurally and color wise, it's kind of two different considerations, maybe.
Advice for aspiring artists or anyone looking to get into the type of work you do?
Um, I think that it's so important to like make a lot of mistakes, and to keep going, because we all have this idea in our head of what we want our work to look like. And until we develop those skills, our work is never going to match this image in our head of what we want it to be. So we have to just keep making and keep being okay with our work not being incredible, because we're still learning and we're still developing. Um, so yeah, I guess just make as much work as humanly possible, and eventually all those mistakes and all those experiments will lead to what you're meant to make. But I think we have a tendency to give up if it's not perfect immediately, and we're going to miss out on what we can be if we settle for what we are in the moment. I'm real good at talking about myself. I think that's probably my best trait as an artist. That's I think that's another thing. That's another piece of advice, is like learn how to talk about yourself, um, because you gotta self promote, because nobody else is gonna do it. Like becomes really vital to making artwork. It's like it's not necessarily that I'm better than other people. It's just that I know how to like make connections and talk about myself, and sell what I'm doing to people.
Yeah.